Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of our attendees joining us today for this latest Data Science Central webinar. This is Bill Voorhees, your host. I'm the Editorial Director with Data Science Central and also Chief Data Scientist for Data Magnum. I'd like to start off our event today by thanking LavaStorm and Tableau for sponsoring today's event. Both companies are longtime supporters of the Data Science Central community, and we're honored to have them sponsoring the event today. I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention and show our appreciation for some of our other recent sponsors, including MapR, Microsoft, Hortonworks, Oracle, and IBM, to name just a few. Past webinars are available on demand at datasciencecentral.com. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at them, I encourage you. They provide very useful insight into a wide variety of topics of interest to our data science community. Today's webinar is entitled Democratizing Data and Predictive Analytics While Ensuring Governance and Transparency. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format of today's webinar. Today's event will be an hour long. We'll have two panelists that I'll introduce in just a minute. There will be a 10 to 15 minute Q&A following the presentation, and this event is being recorded and will be available on datasciencecentral.com later this afternoon following today's live event. I'd also like to encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentation. We'll be reviewing and presenting them on your behalf during the QA portion of today's event. I'm very pleased to introduce today's speakers, Dan Donovan of LavaStorm and Paul Lilford of Tableau Software. Dan is a lead technology evangelist at LavaStorm Analytics and has served in several strategic roles, including Head of Partner Development and Director of Customer Solutions. He has over 15 years of software experience and a deep understanding of the evolving big data market and the challenges that enterprises face with blending complex, large volume data sets, often from disparate sources. Paul is the Director of Technology Partners with Tableau and has over 20 years experience in EPM, BI, data warehousing, OLAP, and analytics. Prior to Tableau, Paul was a director of EPM and BI at United Healthcare, developing a technical team in finance for delivering analytics solutions across the enterprise, supporting thousands of business users and optimizing the use of technology. Thanks for you both for being here with us today. We're looking forward to your presentation. As organizations empower more users to fully leverage advanced and predictive analytics to democratize their data and bring insights to the masses through interactive visual dashboards, they also need to provide enhanced data transparency, collaboration, and governance to gain broader acceptance and trust in the data. In today's DSC webinar, we'll focus our discussion on how the combination of governed self-service data preparation, advanced analytics, and data visualization can help organizations to make informed decisions faster by enabling both data architects and non-technical users to easily view and work with data flows and business logic, to improve transparency by removing the black box and provide actionable, accurate answers that all parties involved can trust, ensure governance and data quality through self-service data provisioning and embedded business rules and data sourcing, and enable anyone to quickly visualize and share information through web-based dashboards. Dan, Paul, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can begin as soon as you're ready to go.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks everyone for joining us. As Bill mentioned, my name's Dan Donovan, and I'm the lead technology evangelist at LavaStorm. I'd like to start today with a few kind of foundational ideas about this idea of democratizing data and advanced analytics, and why we believe that self-service is a necessary idea in the analytics world today. Really, one of the founding principles and one of the reasons why we build our software the way that we do, and the reason that this is an active topic these days, is that really the analytics supply chain is in some ways broken. There are a lot of reasons for this. There's been a lot of disruption both in data technology and in general in awareness and presence of analytics throughout enterprises and smaller businesses as well. And this is driven not only by the so-called big data revolution with higher volumes and velocity of data coming in, but it's also several other factors. So there's a definite shortage of the more technical and more data science-centered skill sets that are necessary to feed today's demand from the business for more predictive and advanced analytics. And there are just more analytics projects happening than can possibly be supported by those bottlenecked sort of technical skill sets. So the traditional model with IT being the supplier of analysis and analytic results and with business being the demand side of the consumer of those analytic results has broken down a little bit. And the way that the world is moving towards fixing that problem is to enable this idea of self-service all the way through what has traditionally been a business intelligence function and a data analytics function, from the top end in visualization and the great things that Tableau does, right down through the data provisioning, data access, advanced analytics, data preparation layer, which is what we do at LavaStorm. If we look at another level down of why this is the case these days, the traditional approach to solving analytics problems is hard. In a traditional world, you've got business users or consumers of analytic results on the right-hand side of this slide, and the producers of those analytic results, typically within IT organizations traditionally, on the left-hand side of this slide. And the process is very much a waterfall software development lifecycle sort of approach to doing these things. So there's traditionally a great deal of time spent on the business side gathering and documenting requirements. Those requirements are then thrown across to a disconnected technical or analytic team that typically lives within IT. Those IT producers then would traditionally develop some functionality and a technical solution that provides the analytic results, and push those results back to the business user consumers for testing, and this leads to, there's always a disconnect between the solution that's provided and the original requirements, or the requirements have changed in the interim. These time cycles are typically measured in months, and so then you go through another iteration of long process of requirements gathering and documentation, pushing those back to the technical team, another iteration of results and testing and change requests and those sort of things. And this limits the scope and the number of analytics projects that can happen because of the long cycles involved. And typically there's an ever-growing queue of analytics projects waiting to happen, and if you have to spend all of this time on the technical side doing a lot of heavy ETL design, pushing data into a data warehouse with a rigid data model, and then building analytics on top of that to push out through some kind of static visualization layer that doesn't really support the needs of the business in the first place. This just limits, first of all, the barriers to entry are very high. This is a very expensive process, both in time and in resources. And it also limits the accuracy that you're able to attain, because in the time that it takes to push these things back to the business users, requirements change and things are constantly evolving. What self-service does when you enable it in the right way is really, it breaks down that wall between the producers and the consumers of analytics, so that the people who are in those consumer roles, who understand the business questions, the reasons for doing analytics in the first place, and the people who need to use those results in order to make business decisions, can get closer to the data and the technology involved in actually producing those analytic results. So if you can reduce not only the time that it takes to produce these analytic results, but also reduce those barriers to entry, so that in the traditional world, you're talking about timescales of months or longer for a lot of these projects. If you can reduce that to weeks or days or hours in some cases, the cost of doing an analysis that doesn't result in a lot of saved time, saved money, reduced cost, other kinds of business value, the risk is much lower than if you spend months doing something and get a poor result or a lack of the result that you're expecting. Also, with the number of data sources and the amount of data coming into an enterprise today, it's not easy to know what value you're going to be able to extract from the data when you do analyze it. Other factors come into play here as well. The prevalence now of predictive analytics and other types of statistical models that were traditionally sort of trapped in the realm of the data scientist now also need to be made available to a broader range of users who typically would not have the skill sets to build those technical solutions using directly something like R or a programming language in order to build those models. If we map this to what's going on in the technology stack that's involved in business intelligence and analytics, the traditional world looks something like this. This is quite a simplified model, of course, but you have source systems that contain the data. Those can be in various types of silos across an organization. They're owned, controlled, and understood by different groups of people. Typically, you feed those, in the traditional world, feed those data sources through a complex, purposely designed ETL layer that extracts the data from those source systems, performs some transformations on that data, and pushes it into a predefined somewhat static data model within an enterprise data warehouse, or more commonly a series of data warehouses and data marts that are just as siloed in many cases as the source systems themselves. And there's quite a technical task in building a semantic layer and advanced analytic functionality on top of that data that's within the data warehouse or warehouses. And then it's usually exposed to the business user and the person who really needs to use those results to make decisions through a series of static reports, dashboards, and key performance indicator monitoring, and sometimes some ad hoc reporting, which in a lot of cases in the traditional world has turned into people logging into their reporting system, dumping all of the data into Excel, and doing whatever they want with it. There are quite a few problems with this. One is, of course, all of the things that we were talking about earlier about the time frames and the skill sets involved in doing this. Another thing is that when people start to self-democratize these things by dumping everything into Excel or similar tools, a lot of the logic and the analytic power is sort of lost. There's no consistency, there's no governance around what people are doing, and there's no transparency to be able to trace that back so that you have confidence in the quality of the results that you're looking at and basing business decisions on. So what Tableau has done is really changed the world and changed the whole paradigm around how we think about these things. They moved this top layer over into the business and turned this into a new function that we all now know as self-service visualization and data discovery. And this opened up a whole new world of data accessibility and analytic power to the people within a business. And so if in the traditional world, the request from the business to IT was something like, I need this report. The answer from IT might have been, sure, we'll have your report ready in 12 months, and the internal cost is going to be $400,000. That's no longer an acceptable answer, and you have no way to build a business case if you're doing things in that traditional way. What Tableau and the world of data discovery have done is change that entire question. So now the question from the business is not ever, for businesses that are enlightened enough to use a product like Tableau, the question is no longer give me this report. The question is, can I have the access to this set of data? And oftentimes the answer from IT is coming back, sure, you can have the data, it'll be 6 months, and it's going to cost $200,000. So the world is a much better place with Tableau around, but our philosophy at LavaStorm and what we're seeing in the market these days is that now there's still a bottleneck. And it really is strapped around this, the whole ETL, data modeling, data warehousing, data availability, data preparation, and advanced analytics piece of this that is really the fuel for what people are doing in the data discovery world and with their visualizations on the business side. And so what we're saying is that now technologies exist that allow you to kind of split this function. So we're not arguing that the world of data warehouses and this traditional model is going away anytime soon. But what we're saying is for the vast majority of analytics projects that are happening within the business and the vast majority of what people are doing in the visualization world with Tableau, you can really take at least part of this function, and you're now able to move this over using new technologies and really turn this into a self-service function as well. And it's a function that the analysts, Gartner and others, are calling self-service data preparation and advanced analytics. If you do this in the right way and enable it with the right technologies, it does several things to open up this world of analytics for the business. One of those things, of course, maybe the most obvious, is broader availability of data sources, a more direct availability of data sources, removing those bottlenecks in the supply chain of data pushing into the great analytic and data discovery things that people are doing on the business side. The other thing it does is it frees up some of those highly technical resources within the enterprise to concentrate on the things that they really want to be focused on. These are things like innovation, evolving the technologies that are contributing to real value in the future state of analytics within the business. And if you can do this in a governed way that enables people to do these great things in a self-service way within the business, but to do that in a way that provides transparency and really confidence in the quality of the data, the quality of the analytics and the methodologies that people are using to analyze data, then this can continue to evolve as a self-service function, providing access to all of those traditional technologies as well as the new technologies and new data sources that people are working with, and to really accelerate the value that businesses get out of their investment in those new technologies by making that data available in a consistent way that's able to be traced, that's able to be reused, and importantly, that's able to be curated so that the right people have the right access to the right data and the right analysis at the right time. What do you need to do in order to enable that function? We see it as sort of the intersection of three broad sets of capabilities. So one, of course, is a data preparation function. I mean, you're dealing with lots of disparate data sources, and you need a way for non-technical or less technical users to be able to bring those data sources together for enrichment and comparison purposes, for just merging and blending data together in order to build a strong foundation for the analytics that you want to perform. And the good tools that are out there today, including, of course, our own from LavaStorm, provide a drag-and-drop visual way of doing this. And we're firm believers in the data flow kind of paradigm for designing these things. Because it's intuitive, because you can inspect the data at each point along the way as you're bringing in data from different sources, cleansing that data, doing more complex data quality checks on the data, bringing it all together from different sources. There are ways to see this data flow through various stages, and it just intuitively makes sense what's going on in the data prep piece of it. This leads into much more advanced analytic functionality. So without the need for traditional programming or coding or lots of scripting or those things, we're opening up the world of advanced analytics, ranging all the way from complex business logic and things like reconciliations between various systems within a business process, all the way through to statistical and predictive models that again, were traditionally trapped in the realm of the data scientist. What you're able to do here is to build data flows that incorporate these kinds of analytics and to have a traceable visual lineage of what's happened to that data as it's passing through from the source systems, through all of your data prep and business rules, through the more advanced analytic models. And then, of course, importantly, is making these results available to people in an intuitive way. And that's why with our platform, we output things directly to Tableau in a native format that people can just use the tools that they're already used to using, or that they're able to do much more with a platform like Tableau when they're being fed these nice, flat, enriched sets of data that have lots of predictive and advanced analytic value added to them. So this world of self-service data prep and advanced analytics is really about adding value to all of that data, and then pushing it out to a broad range of users through a platform like Tableau, where people can actually gain insight very quickly from that nice enriched value-added data. What we're really talking about here in most cases is enabling two cycles, if you will, to happen independently. So in order to govern this effectively and to make it an effective function overall within an enterprise, we really have sort of more technical users or less technical than the traditional IT producers, but maybe the person who's doing this cycle on the left of creating these analytic building blocks that are reusable, and then curating those, so putting them into a repository where the right people have access to them, but with some permissioning around that so that the wrong people don't have access to them. You may have groups of people who have access to use them to build analytic applications and models. You may have other people who only have access to see them. You may have a third set of people who have access to change them and to change the way that these things are working. So we're talking about a very broad spectrum of users that can now participate in this production process for analytics. And they range from the traditional technical skill sets of developers and data scientists all the way through to business users who are used to using the wrong tools for doing this sort of thing. And these are people who are forcing products like Excel and Access and databases, which they may or may not really understand, to do things that they simply weren't designed to do. These newer self-service data prep and advanced analytics tools are designed to do exactly that. And so no matter which part of that spectrum you're on as far as technology and technical skill goes, you're able to contribute to this library or this repository of analytic building blocks that can be used and reused to build lots of different analytic applications that are then feeding the cycle on the right. So these are business users, the people who are asking analytic questions of the data, and people who are looking at those results in Tableau and really gaining insight from those results. They're able to take these building blocks that have been curated and validated, if you will, by the people who have created them. They're able to assemble those into analytic applications, and that can feed their analysis and visualization of data. Now, of course, the idea here is to get as quickly as possible to insight from that data. So again, the producers, wherever they may fall on the technical skill set spectrum, are creating analytic models and building blocks that can then be used by consumers in a reusable, broad way to build these applications that can confidently provide accurate results that can be used to make business decisions. So our argument is that, doing this the right way, using something like LavaStorm and something like Tableau, with the governance and transparency that we've talked about, we're really in a world now where the idea that the analysts threw out a few years ago of governed data discovery is now a reality. So this was an aspirational thought when the analysts started talking about it, say 3 to 4 years ago. We now have spent a lot of effort in building software and technology that can make this a reality. I'm just going to walk through a case study from one of our customers that illustrates part of what we're talking about here. In this case, this is from a large banking group who had as they saw it, a data provisioning problem. So within this banking group, anyone within the bank, business analysts, data analysts within the business, they can go to a web form and they can request a set of data. So that set of data may be something like, I need to see all of the billing data associated with these two products from this certain region for a given time period, and I need all of the currencies converted to US dollars. And so that request is submitted, and the way that they were doing this before, they had a whole team of people who were ETL developers and database people and DBAs and database programmers who would go to work on that data request. They would pull all of this stuff together through an ETL process, push it into a database or a data mart, and then there was a QA team that would come in and test the data and test the ETL process to make sure that the data could be trusted. And then that data would be made available eventually to the person who requested it, typically in a sandbox database that it was up to them to figure out how to connect to and get the data. The average time for fulfilling one of these data requests was somewhere around 4 weeks, at a very high cost due to the technical skill sets involved. What they do now, using our software, is they have this data flow-based agile data provisioning solution that's actually enabled much less technical data clerks to very quickly respond to these data requests. And the way that this works, they have some of those same people who used to be involved in every single data request now create building blocks within our platform of reusable nodes, as we call them sometimes. And these building blocks are specific things, like in my example that I gave, there might be one for pulling billing data from that billing system, so they can drag and drop that. They can then configure parameters around how that data is being pulled based on the things that they see in the data request. Then they can put another, so once those building blocks are built, then the data clerks can pull these together. So they might drag and drop that billing module and fill out some parameters that will pull the right set of data. They may connect that then to some customer data for enrichment, and they may then drag and drop another building block that's been created for doing the currency conversion that's part of the data request. Once they've done this, they have this visual data flow. They can run that data flow with limited configuration of parameters just based on what's come through in the data request, and no scripting or coding involved. So again, much less technical skill sets. They can then push the data out in whatever format the person requesting the data desires. So they push it directly into Tableau in most cases, for example. So now you've really enabled a broader group of people to make use of the data that comes out of this data provisioning process, as well as broaden the number of people who can have the right skills to provide the data that's part of that data provisioning request. Another advantage is once they've built this data flow, they can attach that to the ticket or the request itself. And if that request comes up again in another month's time, they don't even have to drag and drop the building blocks again. They can just rerun it using different parameter values for a different date range or whatever the difference might be. And they can run it again and provide this data over and over. The bottom line value here for the customer is that average provisioning time went from 4 weeks to 4 hours. And of course, the cost associated with each of those individual data requests went way down. The volume of these data requests that they can satisfy, and therefore the number of analytics projects that can happen within the bank is much higher than it was using the old way. They can also add a lot more analytic value to this data and then push it into Tableau, which is the familiar interface for most of the business users and how they're used to interacting with and gaining insight from data. So this is just one example of how having a governed process for enabling this self-service data prep and advanced analytics functionality can really not only enrich and enhance the number of analytics projects that can happen, but it can also drive a lot more value and a lot more adoption of technologies like Tableau because of the availability of data that really fuels people gaining insight from that data within Tableau. So with that, hopefully it's a decent segue to hand it over to Paul Lilford from Tableau.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that a bunch. Thank you for everyone for joining today. I'm Paul Wilford from Tableau Software. I'm a Senior Director of Technology and Market Intelligence at Tableau. I've been at Tableau almost 3 years now, and I came from one of our larger customers in healthcare, where I was there for 5.5 years. And for me, the interesting part of looking at where we are in the market really comes down to customer application of self-service or empowered analytics, as we like to talk about it at Tableau. So I'm going to go through a really quick overview of Tableau for those who don't know us, and then we'll jump into a very quick demo, and we'll try to get to questions as quickly as we can. But at Tableau, we live by this simple mission statement. We help people see and understand their data. And I know you guys, as an audience out there, hear mission statements all the time, and they may or may not resonate with you. But at Tableau, we live and breathe this mission statement. We think about helping people. We empower the business analysts to self-serve and drive analytics and have this natural conversation with their data. We think about the C part. We're a visual company from our grassroots and our origins 12 years ago, where what we do is very visual in nature. We see that as a great mechanism for gaining insight, and that's where the understand part of our mission statement comes in. And then really their data, your data as a customer, whatever that is, whatever your subject area happens to be, whether you're in finance or HR or in marketing or in IT for that matter. All of those areas have different needs of their data. And Tableau's view is we don't really block or think about the different types of data. We just think about the need of the business user, the need of the analyst themselves, the need of the individual who has a question to ask and needs to answer it. And we don't believe the traditional approach of going to someone else and asking them to help you answer the question scales or provides a mechanism that works practically within organizations. So in line with what Dan has been hitting on throughout the presentation today, at Tableau, we think about this cycle of visual analytics. So we focus it around the individual, and we think about the task of getting data, choosing visuals, viewing the data, developing insight, and acting and sharing upon that data. But this is a very interactive, iterative cycle. And my experience in the market tells me that a lot of analysts' time is spent in the preparation of the work to do the job you hire them to do. So more time is spent preparing to do the work you need to do rather than doing it. And when we think about this cycle of visual analytics, you need the ability to not only visualize quickly and find insights in your data, but you need the ability to reshape and attach new data and enrich it further. And that could be predictive enrichment. It could be just enriching it with another data source or another dimension or some other type of data that you want to bring to bear. But the capability of this individual, the individual analyst, the need to do it is clearly understood. The biggest challenge that we find is what Dan has been talking about, which is how do you create this empowered analytics state, but do it at scale and do it in a way that organizations can repeat the best things and stop the things that are not good. And whether the things that are not good are bad analyses or, bad data assumptions, becoming data-driven, in our view, is about empowering individuals to gain access to that data and providing a scalable mechanism to share and reuse that across the organization. So as you go through the act of data discovery and you find a new trend in your business, and knowing that that's a good qualified trend, how do you share that at scale with others? How do you share that really in a simple way? So going from this individual level to an enterprise level of collaboration and sharing and acting and gaining new insight and iterating on your questions is at the core of what Tableau thinks is fundamental to the cycle of visual analytics and fundamental to every organization who wants to become data-driven. If you don't want to use data historically to see how poorly you did or how well you think you did after the fact, how do you get ahead of that? And in our view, the easiest way to do that is to scale the amount of eyes and people touching it, and then balancing that with the enterprise goals of your organization as well as the industries that you sit in and the regulations around it. So This is fundamental to everything we think is empowering this individual and then getting to insights and making data-driven decisions. So if I back up a step, Tableau started out of Stanford University, and on the screen here I've got our three founders. On the left is our CEO, Christian Chabot. In the middle is our Chief Product Officer, Chris Stolte, and on the right was his professor, Dr. Pat Hanrahan from Stanford. And Tableau grew out of a project at Stanford where they were helping do visuals, but it was taking weeks to do visuals. And these guys had this brilliant idea of, well, why don't we make a software that actually works the way the human brain works and helps people gain insight quickly and answer their own questions without having to come to a team like us to help you answer it. And that was the start of Tableau. It started at Stanford. We've been around almost 12 years. We are now the leader in business intelligence, according to Gartner. So for the last 3 years running, we have been the leader in BI. And we've done this because we built the software from the ground up to be visual and to be easy and to be self-service. And really, if you look at what Gartner has said over the last 3 years, there's been a redefinition of BI. It's now about ease of use, business-driven, self-service, things that in the past were not what BI was about. And the idea of empowering people is a really big concept in the market. And it's not just hitting the BI market. It's actually cutting across all areas of the analytics market at large. So things like predictive and integration and data warehousing, customers now are expecting that stuff to be as easy as the things you find in your personal life. So in your personal life, if you're out there shopping and you want to know, are you getting the best price, you just look it up on your smartphone. If you want to know the meaning of something, you Google it. And it's easy. It's as quickly as you think of it, you are asking and getting answers to the questions that you have. And that has now translated into the enterprise. People in their work life expect the same ease that you have in your personal life in terms of access to technology and the ability to ask and answer your own questions. It's an asinine concept that we would back up and start, going to 15 stores to find out, are we getting the best price? We get online and we find those answers today. And the same as that's true in your personal life, we believe that's now translated fully into the enterprise. And enterprises are now trying to figure out, how do we do the self-service idea at scale? And that's really the biggest challenge we see in the market. Is not a technical barrier. It's actually a cultural shift in the way organizations have worked and changing the way you think about it. Empowering business people is a different concept than supporting their report requirement or answering the one question that they've got today. To Dan's earlier point, the idea of building a traditional requirement is kind of an old idea. You need to get to answers quickly. And even if you get to the right or the wrong answer quickly, speed is of the essence. Time is of the essence. The ability to get an answer and make a decision with some sense of urgency is critical in any analytical activity that you have going on. So the way Tableau does this is we bring this to market in the form of basically 4 products. But I will tell you, we really have 2 core products at our essence. We've got the Tableau desktop product, which is the main authoring, publishing, and data discovery vehicle that we've got. And then we've got something called Tableau Server and Tableau Online, which is the main consumption of those analytics. So Tableau Server is our on-prem server where you can publish the results from desktop to server, and web users can consume it over the web or over mobile or over any device with access to the internet. And that's kind of the on-prem version. Tableau Online is where we host the servers for the customer, and basically you push analytics to our server where we host the infrastructure for you. It's a term-based model. But if you look at Server Online, those are 2 of our organizational offerings and the main way that end users consume analytics that are pushed to a central web server. And then Tableau Public is our free public domain. Again, we host these servers. We have over 1 million users in Tableau Public and hundreds of millions of views to date. And I highly encourage you to go out and check out Tableau Public. I'll give you a quick example of what it looks like here in a second. But it's a great way to get good ideas of what people are doing out there. And it's public domain data, so people will tell you about their favorite bike rides in Seattle or their favorite pubs in London or their favorite soccer teams, whatever interests anyone basically on Tableau Public, as long as it's public domain data, you can leverage our capabilities out there and also gain ideas from others that are doing it. So these are the main products that we go to market with. We try to keep it very simple. We don't have a whole bunch of SKUs on our product list. We really have a very simple set of things, and they're all along the exercise of helping people see and understand their data to gain better insights. And every one of these products plays a role in that for us. And so I've got one more slide here, and then we'll jump into a demo. And I'll cover this one really quickly. So this is a core view of Tableau's. We believe the technologies of the past have left the biggest need in organizations underserved. We believe that the analysts themselves were supported by others who didn't necessarily know the business, and it created a bottleneck for things. So there was a small group of technical professionals, whether you're in the business or IT, that served up analytics for the rest of the organization, and this is the old way of doing it. And then there were many people that were spending countless hours in Excel and on their desktop just trying to get their job done because the few could not support the needs of the many. And then most business people were relegated to the tools and things that they had, and they were dealing with the fact that, you know, they had tools that didn't meet the needs of what they needed to do their job, and they were using things like Excel and Access and offline sources to try and get their job done. And the shift that we've seen in the market in the last 3 years is this shift in a need to support the most user base that you possibly can, to empower individuals to be analytical rather than to block them from being analytical. And this is the shift that's occurring all over the analytics market, whether you're in BI or predictive or in data warehousing. This shift to support the needs of the most, the needs of the organization at large, is occurring everywhere. And you do that through scaling the amount of people that can be analytical in their function. And this is a core view of what Tableau does. So with that, I'm gonna jump into a quick demo here, and then we're gonna turn it over to questions. So give me 1 second here to do a screen share. And it is pulling up as we speak, guys, so which tells me it is. Okay. So and if you give us 1 second here, it'll be loaded. And what I have as this loads, I've actually got an output file that was generated by LavaStorm. And so I've got some enriched data that came through the LavaStorm workflow that I'm going to do a quick example. And this is Tableau's desktop product out there. And for example, I can do things like it can say, you know, just show me the price that, the amount of sales by price. But I could also come in here and I could say, well, show me the customers' names that are actually buying it. So very quickly, I've got a bar chart that represents my different customer names. And if I wanted to do something like add a sales quantity or total units to the mix, I could actually just double click that and you'll see now I've got a sales price and a quantity piece. But I can get more analytical really quickly. I just connected to the file that LavaStorm generated here, and I see dimensions and measures. I also see the best-in-class visuals that Tableau has over here, and you'll note that a number of them are grayed out, and that's because I haven't made a combination of selections that make sense for that data. So I'll show you how this show me works here in a second. But in this one, if I wanted to get more analytical very quickly, I could do something like just drag in an average line to the table. I could also bring in an average with a confidence interval into the table, and I could tell it that I want a median as well. So I've dropped in 3 basic trends, and I can do things like say, you know, edit this trend, and it'll tell me, you know, different ways that I can do it. But very simply, I've created kind of an average and a median set of lines, and I can do things in Tableau like single quick sort the data from highest to lowest. And so over here, I've got my customers that are meeting the bar and the customers that are not. And you'll notice some interesting things. In the terms of number of units, it's not necessarily number of units that drives the average sale price based on what I'm seeing. There are people that are not hitting my averages in number of units, but they are actually hitting, you know, the dollars that we set forth. And I could do other things, like I could bring into the fold like a product code and say, well, color categorized by my different product codes. And so this is the idea of visual for Tableau. I'm not thinking about writing code. I'm not thinking about the SQL I generate. I'm actually just dragging and dropping with dimensions and measures that as a subject expert I know. And it's giving me insight into my data. So with this, I'm going to do a couple of other quick examples for you just to give you an idea of what Tableau does. So I'll create a new sheet here, and I'll take our zip code, and I'll open up the show me, and you'll see how everything's grayed out. But I'll pick dollars by zip code. And now I can actually render that as a map of the U.S. It's geocoded, it's intelligent. I can do things like keep my product codes as color to be consistent. I'll make those more of a pie. And because this is really, really hard to see, I'll actually just come in here and I'll lasso some data, and I'll keep just the continental U.S. And then I'll actually, well, if I do it correctly, I'll lasso that, and then I'll zoom in on it. And I can zoom in again if I click the right things. So, you know, very quickly I can look at a variety of things. Now, I did a horrible thing there, so I'm going to back up a little bit because I removed the data at some point there from what we're doing. So I'll just come back to where I can see the data, and I'll zoom in this way. There you go. So now you can actually see the geocodes, and you can see down to the zip code. I can hover or interact with any data that I would like to hover or interact with. So if I ever want to view the underpinning detail, I can do that, right? And the idea here being is it's a very simple way to do it. I didn't think about code again. I just thought about asking questions, looking at sales by zip code by products. And very quickly I got that. I'm going to show you one more visual, and to give you full disclosure, I'm switching data sources here. I want to show you the example of what Tableau does predictive. So our goal is we're not a pure predictive company like a LavaStorm and some of the other companies out there, but we do predictive things within our product. We do basic standard deviations and forecasting. And so here I've got sales versus profit, and I can do things like describe the trend model. And you'll see that Tableau's actually got really sophisticated trend models behind the scenes, but we do it in our way. So we have an integration to integrate with R, and we can do that. But the idea of the average analyst hopping out to R and writing code is probably not that plausible. But what we see out there with partnerships like our LavaStorm friends is the ability to do these predictive models in an object-oriented fashion and provide reusable and scalable measures around it, provides great scale to what can happen predictively. So, for example, you can build an R model naturally, but if you want to bring some scale to it, LavaStorm has some great ways of making that work parallel, as an example. So there's a number of things we can do out the box, but there's also a number of things that when we get an enriched element from LavaStorm, we can just take advantage of the predictive model that's behind it. So this is one example of it. You'll see something else that's kind of fun in Tableau because we want to be easy and visual and do what we've got. If I pull this to the side and I change my trends to look at logarithmic, you'll note behind it, or exponential, or polynomial, you'll actually see all of the shifting in that model as we do it. So everything we do is designed to be real-time, really visual, and really easy for the user. I'm going to stop the demo portion here, and we'll jump back because we definitely want to allow enough time for questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Bill, and we'll go into the Q&A.
Well, Dan, Paul, thanks for a really excellent presentation. We'll get started with today's Q&A session, and I want to thank the audience for their participation. We've had a great many questions that have come in during the presentation, and we'll do our best to get through all of them in the time remaining. So during this Q&A, I'll leave this screen up. It has contacts on it for Dan and Paul in case you'd like to contact them following today's seminar. So let's get started. Dan, Paul, this is a question I think for both of you, since you may have different perceptions of this. What's your perception of the current adoption rate for self-service analytics in the market? I know that fundamentally one of you deals on the consumption end and the other on the provisioning end. Are there different trends involved, and how is the adoption rate proceeding?
Wow. So Dan, I'll start with that and then have you jump in, because I think our answer is going to be similar, but I think you'll have a slightly different take on where it comes from. But Bill, from a Tableau standpoint, we see this as pervasive everywhere. We see it growing across the board. As a company, we have over 30,000 customers today. And if you look at our growth rate year over year over the last 10, I think that actually gives you a good indication of demand for self-service. So there's no doubt that organizations want to become data-driven and want to drive to self-service. I think the adoption rate is slowed by the history of the past a little bit, and the skill sets of folks like myself. Actually, I came from a technical background, and the willingness to kind of let go a little bit, right? We were taught one way for the last 30 years of how you service business users and how you deliver on requirements, and there's a big shift there. So the adoption is everywhere. It's across the board. It's pervasive. It's happening at an ungodly rate. But there's also this bit of trepidation by customers in terms of how do we do this the right way at scale? And I'll stop here and let Dan add to that, because I think his perspective will be on that line.
Yeah, no, thanks, Paul. I agree with everything you just said. I also think that from our perspective, sitting a layer below, if you will, where Tableau sits in the self-service stack, I think that we're seeing now a transition from we're definitely not in the early adopter stage anymore. We're moving into a big uptick in adoption of self-service data prep and advanced analytics. And I think that's been led by the massive uptake of Tableau in the market, and that idea of self-service becoming one that people are more comfortable with. I think interestingly for us, and I think a big differentiator for us at LavaStorm is we're also serving the needs of IT because of the governance and enterprise grade way in which we go about this thing. I mean, our product's been around actually in the market for 12 years, doing a lot of things that are in heavily regulated industries. We have pretty broad adoption now involving IT teams, but they really, what we're seeing as a trend is IT no longer wants to, they kind of want to get out of the way. I mean, they want people to see self-service as a function that IT are enabling and blessing, if you will, and not something that they're trying to stop. And I think that's been a big transition in our end of the market over the last 3 to 4 years.
Well, those are excellent observations. Thanks. And it does lead me to some questions that other members of the audience have asked, and that is, we see that the tension that you are resolving is the inability of limited IT staffs to deliver the data on a timely basis. But some of our audience have observed that this just seems to be some labor shifting from the IT side onto the business side. And while we talk about freeing up business resources to get answers more quickly, clearly this also puts an additional burden on the business side. So how do you reconcile those, and who is driving this? Is it the IT side, or is it the business side? And who is generally pulling this through?
So Bill, yeah, go ahead, Dan, and then I'll jump in.
I was going to say this one might. I'll start, and I think it'll lead into what I think you might say. So first of all, I think that one of the reasons why people with business skill sets are feeling overburdened and really taxed is that they're using the wrong tools to do their jobs. And I think that, by forcing things like spreadsheets and desktop databases to do things that they weren't designed to do, people are wasting a lot of cycles that they could be much more effective with tools like the ones that we're talking about from LavaStorm and Tableau. I think that, so the idea of labor shifting, I think we're actually easing the burden all the way across the board. The other thing is that the shift from, what we're shifting from is a relatively small number of technical skill sets within IT to a much broader base of less technical skill sets within the business. And part of the drive for this, the other part of that question, we see the drive very much coming from the business, with IT as an enabler, as a willing enabler now of this self-service idea. And I think the reason the drive comes from the business is there's a sense of frustration that people are unable to do their jobs because of this analytic bottleneck.
Yeah. So Bill, I'm in full agreement with Stan on that. From a Tableau perspective, we obviously see the business users doing a lot of driving, but more and more we see enterprises in general wanting to move towards becoming data-driven. And the biggest problem there is the fact that, culturally this is just not the way you've done. It's not the way all of your processes have been set up. It's just not the way that you've executed technology of the past. And now with the consumerization of technology that's occurred in our personal lives, the demand has always been there. It just wasn't necessarily realized the same way. So the business was finding other ways to do their job in the past via Excel and text and desktop work. And now they're shifting to a need to get out of the work that the business isn't actually good at. So like Dan, I believe that this is driven from both sides. Everyone is trying to right-size their time investment and do the work they were hired to do, not in prep of the work they were hired to do. And that goes for IT the same way that it goes for the business and art, right? So allowing IT to focus on the architecture, the infrastructure, the data stores, and ensuring that they're set up for discovery rather than purpose-built questions of the past, finite, a limited set of questions that you can ask of your data. Getting to that is huge. To make it worse or to make it more challenging, 88% of the world's data is unstructured. The work that we've been doing for the last 30, 40 years is around the 12% of the data that is structured. And so we couldn't even meet the demand of that 12%. And now we're moving into a state where machines are generating data, everyone's using their mobile devices, data's popping up in all forms and shapes. And we need IT to help focus the architectures and the scalable side of what's happening. So I think it's a mutual effort, slightly more driven by the business.
Well, thank you. Thank you for those excellent insights. As a data scientist, I am personally a Tableau user, and I appreciate the ability to do those data visualizations very quickly. But I'd like to ask, since both of you talk about advanced analytics, how far into the field of advanced analytics are the business users actually delving? Are we talking about business side users trying to do response modeling or clustering, or is it different than that?
So, Paul, if you don't mind, could I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just thinking I'll start and hopefully tee it up for you. What I see and what we see in general in the market is more and more adoption of advanced analytics and predictive models within the business. A lot of them are those kind of common tasks. So different kinds of clustering algorithms, forecasting models. People want to use an ARIMA model to forecast their sales numbers, or they want to look at collections problems and use it for targeting, who's likely to pay, doing logistic regression types of analysis for yes/no questions, or A/B testing, or those kind of common statistical predictive functions. I think that what we're also seeing, what we're trying to do, is also provide a platform for data scientists to put together much more complex and specific models, machine learning algorithms and things like that, that can then be packaged up and parameterized in a way that they can be used by non-data scientists. So, for example, there may be some kind of custom risk model within a bank that a data scientist might build into one of our building blocks, right? And then data that someone's looking at in Tableau can be pushed through that analytic model and enriched based on parameters that that business user wants to use to tweak that algorithm. And then they can look at that risk data in Tableau and get insight from it right away. So that might be something much more sort of custom and complex that a data scientist does want to get involved in the development of that model, but doesn't want to be involved in the every time somebody wants to use it, they don't want to have to run it or customize or tweak the parameters. So we provide a way for that to happen, as an example.
Yeah, and Bill, I agree with that. You know, in the same way that BI has been democratized, I think the role of data science is getting democratized, but I don't mean that the role of the data scientist is changing. We're trying to scale the data scientist. The valuable work that happens that's very detailed has to scale. And business users, to answer the specific question you asked, they are getting more predictive and more statistical in what they do. So the forecasts and regressions and things like that we do out of the box tend to address the main demand we see from the business for doing predictive things. But more and more, these worlds are blending together, and the business user wants to be more forward-looking in their analytics. And you need the predictive work to do that. You need the role of the data scientist to do that. And you need to find a way to scale it so the data scientist doesn't become the same bottleneck that the traditional technologist has played with traditional tools, where they just could not meet the demand coming from the business. So by exposing that great logic to more users, you get a vetting and a validation and reuse of it that brings the scale to the market.
Well, Dan, Paul, thank you for some great answers to some very good questions. You know, for those of you that asked questions that weren't answered today, we'll be sending all the unanswered questions to Dan and Paul and their teams so they can follow up with you after today's webinar. I have just a few quick announcements. First, if you'd please mark your calendar for October 13th, that's our next Data Science Central webinar, which will be Data Science-Driven Approaches to Malware Detection, sponsored by Pivotal. Also, let me remind you that today's taping will be available for on-demand viewing later today, and it can be found on the home page of Data Science Central in the Webinar tab at the top of the page. Well, this brings today's webinar to a close, and I'd like to thank our audience for their attendance and thoughtful questions, and a special thanks again to LavaStorm and Tableau for their sponsorship, and our speakers today, Dan Donovan and Paul Lilford, for their insights into today's topics. My name is Bill Voorhees. I'm very pleased to have been your host for today's event, and I look forward to seeing you all again on October 13th. Have a great day.